so thick.
He didn't know it. Or maybe he did. But that was going to be Michael Jordan's last season with the Chicago Bulls. The superstar and face of the NBA had already achieved everything. Although he was no longer the 23-year-old kid who could dunk from the free throw line, Jordan was still the best player in the world. With 5 championships under his belt and 4 MVPs, MJ wanted to keep racking up the achievements. He was already the best player in history, but he wanted to set the bar so high that no one could ever beat him. However, there was one factor working against him: time. Michael was already 35 years old, and his time in the NBA was running out. Meanwhile, new dynasties were emerging from among the league's most talented youngsters, and one of them was destined to succeed. Not just in the short term, but the San Antonio Spurs were laying the foundations for one of the longest-lasting dynasties in history. Michael Jordan didn't just have to compete against time, he also had to compete against them. But don't worry, because when he got the chance, number 23 showed that he was still invincible. What can one say about the 98 Bulls? The unbeatable team, unmatched, with the brightest star in the firmament. Michael Jordan had established Chicago as the epicenter of the NBA, and fans around the world anxiously watched his every move. He had already transcended basketball. He was much more than an athlete. His sneakers were known worldwide, on absolutely every continent. But the league was at a glorious moment thanks to his story, and also thanks to his inhuman performances. The Bulls had won 2 championships in a row. They only needed one more to complete the three-peat, something that seemed unthinkable if it weren't for the fact that they had already achieved it. Chicago was fighting for its second three-peat in just 8 years, and the supporting cast around Michael was stacked. Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Tony Kukoc, Luke Longley, Ron Harper, and Steve Kerr. It was a dream team, except for one factor. Most of them were past their prime. Pippen was 32, Rodman 36, Harper 34, and Kerr 32. The clock was not only ticking for Jordan, but also for his teammates. Although that didn't stop Chicago from starting the season with extreme force. The Bulls reached mid-March with a record of 46 wins and 17 defeats. They led the entire Eastern Conference with a completely unstoppable style. Yeah, their offense was extremely strong, but their defense was the identity of those Bulls. Their slow pace combined with their incredible ability to protect the paint and half-court defense made them a nightmare for offensive systems. But if there was any team the Bulls suffered against, it was those with a powerful big man. What was the problem? There was one NBA team that had 2. David Robinson's San Antonio Spurs had a season to forget in 1997. When the Admiral got injured, the team's aspirations were buried under the ground. But that process of suffering paid off, because after winning 20 games that season, the Spurs hit the jackpot in the draft lottery. In the 1997 draft, they were lucky enough to have the first pick, and for that reason, Tim Duncan became the team's future bet under newcomer Greg Popovich. Now, what they didn't know was that Duncan's impact was going to be so extraordinary, and also immediate. Duncan and Robinson formed an interior duo that people called the Twin Towers, powerful enough to counter the best defensive bigs in the league. David brought his experience, his rim protection, his ability to score, but Tim brought that youth and athleticism that any team needed. Even without an adjustment period, the Spurs were able to create a solid system that, like the Bulls, was also based on defensive identity. And also like the Bulls, it had given them amazing results. By mid-March, the Spurs had a record of 43 wins and 20 losses. Although the regular season wasn't over yet, they were staging the greatest turnaround season in NBA history. Never before had a team gone from the bottom to the top this fast, until San Antonio. Little did they know, they were building what would become the most successful franchise of the next 2 decades. For that very reason, when the Chicago Bulls and the San Antonio Spurs crossed paths in the regular season in mid-March, everyone wanted to see what was going to happen. 2 imperial defenses that also had offensive stars. One side represented the past and present, while the other represented the future. In the duel between the 2 best teams in the NBA at the time, everyone had already decided on a winner. Because, after all, both teams were clear candidates to win their respective conferences and make the finals. But the most important thing is that this duel didn't just represent that. It also represented the clash between 2 unique generations. March 14th, 1998 at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio. The 2 teams were preparing to battle it out in the eagerly awaited duel. And it took Michael Jordan just a few seconds to show that this, like practically every other one in the last decade, would be his night. The Twin Towers were useless if MJ was able to receive in the low post and attack as he pleased. But also, Duncan and Robinson's offensive power was useless if MJ was able to stop them in the paint. Look at the block Jordan gets on Tim on this play, swatting the ball and sending it into outer space. Pippen had started the game on fire, knocking down jumpers with ease. But after a miss, Michael Jordan makes a huge effort to capture an offensive rebound between the San Antonio Towers. And not only that, but while he's fouled, he manages to drill the bank shot for the and one. Both on offense and defense, Jordan was omnipresent. He was everywhere at once, and when he received the ball in the low post, everyone knew what was going to happen. He had been tormenting defenses for 15 years, so did the Spurs think he would stop doing it now? Although, David Robinson was also lethal from that spot, which helped San Antonio stay alive in the game. However, Michael was able to find looks much more easily. His mid-range jumper was still as unstoppable as ever. Although the Spurs' two big men managed to link up easily, finding easy looks thanks to their size, Jordan was still in attack mode. When he couldn't score, it was because he had been fouled. It was the only way to try and minimize his incredible production. The problem is that despite his age, his athleticism was still absolutely elite. Look how, for the second time in the first half, MJ gets another key offensive rebound, in the form of a tip-in over the giant David Robinson. But the only reality is that he was the only one who was putting in enough effort. The size difference between the two teams was noticeable during the second quarter. So much so that Chicago only managed to score 13 points in the second quarter. Luckily, Michael's 13 points allowed them to go into the break with a 1-point lead. But the momentum was 100% with the Spurs. It seemed that, in a way, they had found the formula to stop the Bulls, and now they just had to finish the job in front of their home crowd. But Michael Jordan's fortitude was unbeatable. Look at this play. Right at the start of the third quarter, MJ drives to the hoop using his left and then goes for a reverse layup. But David Robinson gets a piece of it. Undaunted, Jordan picks up the ball again and attacks once more without thinking twice. Just afterwards, he drains the mid-range jumper. No one had ever managed to intimidate him in his career. Why would the Twin Towers? His efforts at the offensive glass continued to be rewarded with baskets, as in this play in which MJ and Rodman get those valuable second chance points. And as always, he continued to build his offense from the low post. This time, attacking the hoop after the post-up, Michael gets another 2 points for Chicago. Now, from the right wing? No problem! Jordan uses his incredible first step again to go around his defender and finish with a precise floater over Robinson. And not only that night the fans also saw incredible dimes from MJ setting up his teammates, like in this play, in which Kukoc finishes with an acrobatic finish for the and one after a pass by Jordan. Each basket was a fierce battle, an incessant struggle, but Jordan always came out on top. Look how, again from the low post, MJ uses his physicality to finish at the hoop. The presence of one of the all-time great defenders didn't seem to bother him in the slightest, and at that point in the night, the fact that Jordan had the ball in his hands was so threatening that his opponents were almost forced to foul him. They believed all his jabs, all his pump fakes, but the next play served as proof of why this was happening. If they didn't foul him, Jordan was going to drain the shot over them every damn time. And if you give him an inch of space, he was going to use his speed to get to the hoop. He literally had no counter. He didn't care who was under the hoop when he went downhill, and the truth is that his incredible performance in the last quarter, scoring 9 points, was too much even for the Spurs to get back into the game. Jordan had done it. Again. With 30 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 steals, he showed San Antonio that they still had a lot to learn. Although the playoffs, in the event that both teams reach the finals, would be another story, right? The truth is, no. Nobody could stop the Bulls that season. Not the Nets in the first round, not the Hornets in the second round, not the Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals, not Karl Malone and John Stockton's Utah Jazz in the NBA Finals. Once again, Jordan was unbeatable. His "the last shot against Byron Russell" went down in history as one of the most iconic moments in basketball. A basket that allowed Jordan and the Bulls to win their 6th championship, his second three-peat, a feat that has not been repeated since, and probably never will be. Thanks to that, Michael put the finishing touch to an unimaginable career. Because a few months after that amazing performance against the Spurs, the Bulls legend decided to call time on his career, at least for the moment. San Antonio had it all. A superstar already established and another with enormous potential. They had the size, the advantage of youth, the athleticism, but they forgot the most important thing. Michael Jordan doesn't lose big games. Although the Spurs achieved the success they were looking for during the following season, in which Greg Popovich's team was crowned NBA champions, they had to wait until Jordan left the lead to get their shot. Because as the saying goes, there's always a bigger fish in the sea. Unless you are Michael Jordan. The Spurs would go on to win 5 titles over the next 15 years, but not before Jordan had the final word. Now, could Duncan and Robinson have dethroned MJ if he stayed one more year? A team that was best built to overthrow him, even if in the end they didn't succeed? Or would you choose another team to try to achieve this impossible mission of beating the GOAT? Drop your pick in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. If you live for legendary breakdowns, epic rivalries, and the moments that made basketball history, subscribe to First 5 Hoops and join a community of real basketball fans. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with all our latest content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.